Hey there, Thomas. That's such a cool score. I really love the spirit of experimentation and the way you try to solve some problems. But there are some other problems that are kind of that you need to overcome first. Okay, so a few fundamentals. And I in a score in a release that happened yesterday, there was at least one or two composers in a website compilation. I think it's F. There was at least one or two composers that did not really use all that many slurs, and it's perfectly fine. Like if you are just getting to learn to use them, but there are certain there are certain things that you could do. I mean, you sort of have to think of a sense of musical phrasing, right? So when you don't have any slurs at all, it's almost like a sentence that's missing punctuation, right? And like with it, if it doesn't have a dynamic at the beginning, it's like it's missing a capital letter, right? And so the slur really kind of gives some context. And I noticed that there are a few here and there. But just generally overall, maybe that was something that you left out of your editing or something like that. But certainly, like if you sort of think about the bowing of the players, like in a bar like this, you could easily have like bowing the half bar, da da, right, that kind of thing. But here, not slurring across repeated notes. Unless you have a specific intention, right? But just, if you don't have any slurs, there's a certain blockiness to it, right? A certain kind of, it's almost like every note is emphasized and every note has a kind of a tiny little push to it of articulation where they could be smoothly connected, right? Now, I'm really hoping, Thomas, that you have watched, several, maybe a couple dozen at least, of these evaluations already of other entries, because I don't want to repeat things too much. I'd really just rather focus on what really works in your score and how we can fix it and so on and so forth. So you'll have noticed if you've watched those videos that I really try to get people away from just dumping the piano phrasing slurs onto wind and brass instruments. So, here's a kind of an example of that. I think that the slur originally went all the way across, right? So that's actually the way to do it. If you really intended for this all to be under one bow, then you would slur all the way across to the end of the tie, not the beginning of the tie, right? I mean, there are a few styles where you slur to the tie and then the tie is its own thing, but that's almost nobody does that anymore. But in a case like this, it really would be better to go down then up, slurring these two together, and then down, and then up, slurring these two notes together. Do you see what I mean? It's just a very simple, almost a very simple rule. And now here, like, I think that these are intended to be, like some of this playing is intended to be non-divisi. So you really have to mark that. Right, so here you're saying piano divisi. The divisi mark isn't. It isn't in italics. It's put above. It's like technique text is what they call it in Sibelius. So technique text above the staff, right? So you wouldn't really put it after the dynamic. And then here we don't know if you intend divisi, non-divisi. What is it? Right, and then, like for instance, this is very, very easy to play non-divisi, but then this, I guess, if this is just all played, I mean, yeah, that could still go non-divisi, but I mean, then walking up to this, it's a little weird. Okay, so it's the kind of thing where I would really work with a cellist just to make sure that this flowed nicely. Or consult with a cellist. And then here you're saying arco double stops. So you just want the player to sort of reach over and touch this and then reach up and touch that? I don't understand what you mean here. Right? Is this intended to tie to a like they're playing the C and then they reach over with their bow and they touch this low D, right? And then they reach up and touch this E. That doesn't quite, I'm not sure that it quite works, right? Another thing you would want to consult with a cellist about. And I don't see why you can't just have this divisi, why it has to be double stops. And you wouldn't say double stops anyways, you would say non-divisi, non space div period, non-div, okay? And, right. And here you can just say unis, unis period, and since it's technique text, it doesn't need to be italics. It can just be just regular text above the staff, right? The problem with putting technique instructions in italics is that they can be confused with the, like it's always italics below and a technique above in like so italics below, technique and regular text above, that way that they don't get mixed up, right? When you have staves that are really close together, the italic text for the staff below could be confused for something to do with the expression text for the staff above, right? And the same thing here, the divisi would be in plain text above the staves. Okay, so that's just some basics. All right, well, the one thing that I would really say about this is that, listening to the mock-up just feels really heavy-handed. It just really feels almost brutal. Like, you have this marked piano, and like the mock-up feels like it's playing mezzo forte. It just really feels way too powerful, right? And I don't think it's a very good guide for you as an orchestrator, So, a lot of things did not come through, like the harp right in here, and here you have harp marked, like you have expression text under both, like a dynamic marking under both staves, and it should only be in the middle, right? Because the harp reads, it's just like a piano player, so you don't need this under here. I'm not sure if this is Dorico or MuseScore or Lilypond or whatever, but whatever it is, I'm sure there's a way of setting your dynamic marking, just like in Sibelius, so that it affects both staves, so you don't have to do this. But, one way or another, it's just, there's so much weight here that a pianissimo harp would just disappear, right? If anything, the harp should be marked up rather than down, right? So, it would be better for everybody to be pianissimo and for the harp to be piano. Or if everybody is piano, for the harp to be mezzo piano or even mezzo forte in order to be clearly heard. But whenever you're using, brass or, big thick textures like this, the harp is in that middle register, it just disappears. I don't care, like how you mark it, it could just really get swallowed up. So a nice big, it would be better for this to be bigger rolled chords very high if you're going to have this thick of a texture. And it is a big thick texture that you've got here, even though you have everything marked piano, right? So those are just, some of the realities, right? So this could be a lot smoother, more slurring, but not slurring based on the piano score. Slurring based on, like what is the give and take of the music in terms of its meaning, of its rhythmic meaning, of its and the way that it's singing. And then you sort of set a trap for yourself in here with this B-flat clarinet line in the middle, and then the strings on the outside kind of carrying that melody, that harmonized melody, in between and below the octaves, right? So the problem here is that this little kind of middle harmonized held note it's kind of taking over the inside of this harmony right in here. So you really hear the clarinet more than you hear the strings, right? So it's like everybody's focused on this kind of not really very important part being played by the clarinet, whereas this is much, much more important, the violas and the first violins, right? So I just feel that there are, there's some decisions in here that are, that like the weight of the function, right, is out of proportion, right? Just the pungency. I mean, like, and a lot of this is experimentation too. It's like, to try this, did it work? No, yes, right? So you are just trying different things out, right? Okay, so let's also talk about notation standards for timpani. This is, is dotted quarter note equals 77. It's not a very fast tempo, right? And so I feel it's not really realistic for the timpani to be scored out as dotted, dotted whole notes, let alone dotted half notes, right? So it's, like on a roll, that's fine, but like these timpani notes are really not going to last very long. They're going to, at the most, they're going to last maybe like a half note or like maybe a dotted quarter note or something like that. I would actually mark them as dotted quarter notes, right? Because here's the problem, Thomas. I really want you to understand this. Part of the power and sustain of a deep percussion instrument is in the response of the hall, right? It is the hall that is carrying the reverberation, right? It has the sort of an older way of saying reverb, right? So the reverberation of the hall is what's creating the sustain in a timpani part. So the timpanist will actually damp the head after like a loud stroke because they don't want the sort of wiggling of the timpani head to interfere with any more. They have a clean hit, boom, and then they damp it really quickly, and then it's the hall is carrying the rest of the sustain. Do you see what I mean? So, I mean, it's perfectly fine for you to write very, very long durations, but it's not really realistic, right? So I think it would just be better to have these as strokes, as dotted quarter notes. All right? And then here you're saying niente to piano. So, like, okay, so I've mentioned this, and I'm sure you have heard at least one of my evaluations and lectures, all right? But really, here's another thing about niente, okay? Do not use niente unless it is an effect that the audience is supposed to hear and focus on. Unless it is something that is a special feature of the music fading off into nothing, where the audience goes, oh, wow, that was so amazing. Or the music comes out of nothing into something. However, nobody is going to be noticing how the timpani sneaked into this texture here, right? Especially if you're only going up to piano. So you might as well just mark triple P here, because that is exactly what you're going to get. You could mark this N, crescendo to piano. You could mark a triple pianissimo, crescendo to piano, and you get the same damn thing, right? So just write triple P, all right? Because it's unnecessary, A. B, it sort of creates this habit in you as an orchestrator to just throw that in all the time, even possibly with instruments that can't do it, like oboe or bassoon. They can't really get a true niente crescendo to whatever. Or they can't fade out in that same way, in that sort of effortless way that, say, a clarinet or a string instrument or a lower flute could, right? So really, seriously, just don't throw in the niente unless the entire focus of the audience is on that niente, okay? So in this place, it's just it's a throwaway, right? So respect the niente. It's like it's almost like a like a broadsword or something. It's like like some dangerous weapon, right? That you don't want to play around with. You just want to very carefully use. All right. So, but just in terms of talking about like the orchestration, right? I've focused on a lot of little details, little finicky details here, but like in terms of the orchestration, it's not that this wouldn't work, but I'm curious as to how this would have sounded if you had if you were thinking about the emotion of the entire phrase, right? And thinking about how you had to get from here to there, and along the way you had to say something, you had to take us on a journey, even just over 10 bars, right? Now, what would happen with the orchestration then? Like what changes would have to occur? How would it have to evolve for us to feel like we had reached a different place by the time we got to the end of this entire phrase, right? So that would be my my only critique about the first 10 bars, is that I feel that as adventurous and experimental as you are as an orchestrator, all these things you're trying out, I was just wondering why you didn't try out more strategies in the beginning, right? And take us in different places and exercise your brimming ingenuity, right? I mean, you really are thinking of a lot of things and trying a lot of things out, throwing them at the wall, so on and so forth, right? So kind of moving into this, like I said before, it's very thickly drawn. I mean, I actually kind of like how you got the octave first and second violins, then you've got the harmony from the violas below. That's all good. As I said before, you could have really worked on the slurring and phrasing and so on, down, then connect these two as an up bow with a slur over them, down bow, up bow connected with a slur, and so on and so forth. Right? This could have been down bow, up bow connected by a slur, right? And then, and once again, the divisi goes over the top, right? And same as right in here. Okay, I already said that. Okay. So, you've got this doubled in oboes. Excuse me. Then English horn below, right? And then you've got further doubling on the lower note of the octave in your first clarinet. So that is a huge amount of weight on the bottom of the octave. Just a really, and there is very little doubling above, right? So like you've got, the only thing that you've got doubling on the top voice is your first oboe. And what have you got doubled on the bottom voice? You've got alto flute, you've got second oboe, you've got English horn, and you have got first clarinet, right? But then you, of course, you change around the role of the first clarinet as you go. But like, it just is a huge amount of weight. The flute is sort of sitting around here doing nothing, right? Could they have helped out? I mean, how does the clarinet really need to jump in there? What kind of sound do you want there? Do you want this incredibly penetrating sound on the second violin? Because that's what you're going to get. It's going to almost feel more like a wind band sound with that, four different characters of wind all sort of sitting on that same note along with the second violins. Now, speaking of slurring, is this all intended to be separate, separated notes, da 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 da? But like, see here, you have this long tie, so it just seems to be out of character for this not to be slurred, right? Right. And then also the other thing is, why can't the second player go A D A? Why is the first player going D D D? Right, there's some confusing division of the way of the duties of this line, right in here. And no slur at the end there. Just sort of confusing the way that this is all scored out. So and then if it's meant to match the pizzicato, then maybe some of the notes could be staccato, right? So it's just really unclear that what the intention is here. Now this low contrabassoon note, I mean, it's really creating a lot of weight in this texture, right? Which is already heavy enough, right? I mean, despite the fact that you've marked it piano, there's still just a lot of weight going on there. And then also, like here, you are doubling the low note of these little harmonized, the way the thirds are harmonizing with the octave melody, but you don't have a note on, you don't have anything on the upper note, right? So couldn't both clarinets have been doubling this? That would just be a lot more stable, right? And then as to the use of the alto flute in here, I mean, it's fine. There's nothing unplayable about it, but there is something that's sort of inaudible about it, right? The alto flute is not made to compete in big textures like this. It can be used in textures that are complex and bigger, but it has to be very, very carefully managed so that it isn't just a throwaway, right? So like there's kind of like nothing in here that couldn't be played and have a better effect, say by third clarinet or some other kind of a thing, right? It just seems to me a bit of a wasted opportunity the way that the alto flute is used right in here, right? Because you've already got all the weight you need with the with the second oboe and the English horn and the B flat clarinet. With that much weight on it, the alto flute it just won't come through, right? It won't really have much of a chance to to participate. Now with stuff like this, try to trade off, try to leave the, I see the problem that you've set up here. Like you're sending your clarinetist all the way up to the top here, so you think, oh, well, it would be better for the second to play this and then the first to just continue on, but try not to do that. Try to figure out different solutions. If you're going to be tonguing on the middle beat here, the middle beat of the bar, then it doesn't matter who is playing it and who is tying it, right? Because it's going to be the sound of it, like the tie is going to be negligible, right? So it would be better just for the second part to end playing this written F sharp, and then for the first to take over the top. So just try not to have this kind of stuff, because it just gets to be tortuous after a while. Okay, really try to have them stay in their lane. It's helpful for the players because they're used to adjusting their intonation to each other, based on the the second is adjusting their intonation to how they hear the first player playing on top of them, right? So that is their game, right? They're really used to that, and you can flip them, and it's fine. They'll play it, and they'll be good at it and everything else, but it's just kind of a bother in the end, all right? It's kind of like the orchestrator showing off, right? And you don't want that. You want people to be amazed at your ability to create an overall impression, rather than one or two neat little things in the wind part, out of curiosity as to how it would work out, right? So just really better to keep the first on top and the second on the bottom, unless absolutely, see, there's nothing about this that absolutely screams that that's the only way to solve the problem, right? So try not to solve the problem like that. Okay. Yeah, and so here you've got notes that should be written in bass clef, and this really is more of like, this should be fourth horn. Okay, and this fourth horn note should be doubled by a secure note in another brass or wind instrument, right? Like bass clarinet, or it could be doubled by basses, or it could be doubled by, say, softly played tuba, one or the other. But once you start getting really, really low, like scoring that low A, and even maybe just like you've got a horn player doing nothing here, right? So couldn't you have like two horns playing this? It just needs some security, all right? Horns hunt better in pairs, especially low horns. Right? That's a horns hunt better in pairs. That's a orchestration teacher's saying. All right. So as you can see, there are many issues in here. All right, and yeah. So they're just some things that kind of need adjustment. You might be thinking, well, look, there's a contrabassoon note down here, but that's an octave lower than this horn note, right? So yeah, so that doesn't help them. All right, okay, so those are just some things to think about it. I think that like to really go over this, we would need like a couple hour lesson, right? And you might end up changing a bunch of things. So it's not worth it for me to to spend too much time on it. Let's keep moving forwards. All right. So here we've got this B section. Very, very cool. And now all of a sudden we've got slurs, right? So where were they on the previous page? So maybe just, and then here, like, we've got this really high bassoon note here. Yeah. So this high bassoon note above the English horn, right? See, like, it would be way easier to swap these, right? So like this it's just like just a cleaner sound. Like the way that it's scored, there is really nothing about this high bassoon note that really is adding any, like, it's there's nothing about that timbre that is necessarily going to change anything a whole lot if you swap them, right? So it really would be better to have the English horn playing this high sounding A, right? It's the basic same note as this, right? This written E, and then having the bassoonist, the first bassoon player, playing the sounding C here. Yeah. All right, so look, subito piano when you were already mezzo piano before. Oh, so okay, so some of this is mezzo forte. All right, so yeah, I think like if you were already, I think if you really want this to be even and balanced, subito pianissimo, okay? But all the same, why does it have to be subito? Why can't you have like a sudden? Why can't you just throw in like a diminuendo hairpins like right at the end here? Just like really, just bring it down, because that's better than da 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 da. Better da da. I think it's better to sort of like, as you look forward into this bar dynamically, it's better to bring it down and just to approach it more, more logistically. Now here, like, I don't have as big a problem as going diminuendo to niente right here. But I mean, it's not really possible for the oboist to get the same kind of niente that clarinet could. But like in your yeah. Yeah, so look, I mean, it's don't bother with niente. Just write triple P, all right? And all the parts. Not just, so go to pianissimo here and then go triple P. Same thing, just they're all fading out and you have to give them a destination, okay? All right. And yeah. So I one thing I do have a problem with here is the doubling here, because what's going to happen is, like, you're thinking, oh well, this will be effortless, that way I get this really really low, this very very low sounding A right down here, that can't be reached by the clarinet, right? And then we're also we've got this the strings doubling it and everything else, and it sort of carries the clarinet upwards and all that. That's great, except for the fact is you're not going to be able to escape, even with a diminuendo coming out of the bass clarinet part. You're not going to be able to escape the phenomenon of phasing, even with all of the other string doubling and everything else. All right, so it would be better for you to hand off right here, right in the middle of the bar. Just hand right off to that sounding F sharp. Okay. Dovetail. So bass clarinet ends on this F sharp. First clarinet starts on that F sharp. Okay? And that way you don't have to worry about fading out. Just have them all just kind of and it'll work a lot better doubling along with playing with the cellos and violas working together. Okay, and then you have this beautiful rise right in here, coming down to there, and then so now here, like, you didn't go for the bass clarinet helping out in the lower pitches, right? I'm just kind of wondering why it had to be clarinet both times. Could there have been an answer here? Like, here you had clarinet. Could you have gone to bassoon handing off to English horn handing off to oboe, or English horn handing off to flute, maybe, right? After the bassoon. So just a ton of things, it just sort of feels, there's a feeling of sameness about this, right? And it doesn't necessarily, like, the same dynamic, so it doesn't echo or anything, and they're covering kind of the same range, right? This is all cool in here. Yeah, so the timpani creates a kind of a boom, ba-boom, boom, ba-boom, kind of a rhythm in here, which feels kind of dancey and you know, it's it reminds me sort of a slow foxtrot, if you know what I mean. So, you know, maybe that's not the impression that you wanted to create there, but you know, if you wanted to avoid that kind of sense of pacing that's a bit, you know, it has a kind of a pop sound to it, right? So just that's what I heard. So if you want to avoid that, maybe watch out for that. I think if you want a short note here to match the pizzicato, put a staccato there. I can understand this pizzicato, pluck, and then the contrabassoon sustain, right? And that way you get the kind of the almost the sound of a piano, you know, like from the piano instrument, right? Of just like of the attack and then the sustain of a piano note, of a pianoforte note. So yeah, that's, you know, but then like right here on these short notes, I think you should have a staccato just so that it matches up perfectly. All right. You know, in this, like once again, very thick texture. Alto flute kind of doesn't have much of a role. Yeah, wouldn't it have been cool if the alto flute had something to do with this? You know, just like its incredibly beautiful, sensitive texture had somehow answered the clarinet, right? So you just really get a counterpoint of colors, right? And then right in here you've got the some fancy footwork here for the harpist. Nothing too serious. G sharp to G natural. That's all good. Okay. Now here, let ring throughout. Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, you're saying let ring throughout, but like if you were just to not have rests, then you don't need that, right? So just tie this to an eighth note, then have this be a quarter note, right? And then tie this to the same eighth note, and then just consistently score this all the way through, filling in all the rests with sustained notes tying and or just longer time values depending on where it's placed. And you don't need to say let ring throughout. The dynamic has to go in the middle. I don't, you know. But and then the other thing too is that like this is going to be divided between the hands of the harpist with these higher G's will be played by the right hand, right? So the left hand will be going, you know, bottom note, top note, right hand, right? So that's how it's going to work. So it'd be better to put these in the upper staff. Right, and then you don't need to look. It is a sustained instrument, right? That like, you know, unless you tell the harpist in a passage like this to damp the notes, they're going to let them sustain. That you don't need to say this. Okay. All right. So some of the, I just think overall there needs to be a little bit more dynamic shaping to the phrases. Okay, so just like, you know, the phrase, yeah, the you've got these long melodies. They don't really, there's no nuances. They're just soft or loud, right? And they just last for 8 bars or 10 bars or whatever. And there's like no change. You know, same thing in here. Like there was no dynamic change anywhere. You just set the tempo, then you know, and then it came to an end, right? So what is going on here expressively? Right? I mean, here we have crescendo, and we eventually end up at a mezzo forte. I think if you're going to have anything that is longer than 2 bars of a crescendo, then you should write poco poco crescendo, okay? Because otherwise the player might just, you know, crescendo for 1 bar or 2 bars or something, and then just this kind of stay where they were, right? Usually they'll interpret it as a poco poco crescendo, but just write it if that's what you mean, okay? All right. All right. Okay, so if you intend for the octave harmonic, then just write out the intended sounding note with a circle over it. Okay? Don't do this. All right? Now this is fine. This artificial harmonic on an open C string. That's perfectly fine. Okay. Now here we're kind of, yeah. Right. I mean, okay, so harmonic glissando needs not to be precisely. You don't even need to say that. But I think you should just say harm gliss. All right, above. Just say HARM period gliss GLISS period. Okay, and they will just play it. They don't worry about things needing to be precisely together or whatever. Right, and here I can see like you're trying to sort of use open strings and stuff for different effects. You don't really need the sounding dynamic, right? You just need the artificial harmonic position, and I would actually worry about trying to get a really good sound out of that third like that. Like usually it's like about the limit of where I would push a viola, and then here like on the G string. I mean, I think there are better ways of getting this pitch with artificial harmonics, right? Yeah, I think. I mean, I understand what you're doing here. Like, so, like this, it's like the spirit of experimentation, right? So, like you can just easily get a B right in here and so on, but you might actually find them just jumping up the G string, right, rather than because so here's the thing, right? The way that you have got this score, like you've got this incredibly delicate stuff happening with the strings, all right? But you've got third trumpet playing this. By the way, this, even though it's low, it should still be first trumpet playing a low solo, okay? So that's the first thing, right? You give the responsibility to the player who has agreed to take on the most responsibility. And any player in any group of instruments, any family of instruments should be able to play throughout the entire range of their instrument with equal proficiency. All right, for any solo, right? So that doesn't, like, if there's section work, if the groups are working together, or there's like certain little lines that come out or whatever, fine. Just give the low part to the low player, the high part to the high player, and so on. But in a situation like this where it's an extended solo, it just goes on and on and on, then really then it's really the responsibility of the leader of the section. Okay, all right, oops, I'm going the wrong direction here. Okay, so all right, but back to the strings. So the problem is you've got a very resonant instrument, even at pianissimo here, right? And you want some clarity from this player, right? You want them to play loud enough for their part to mean something, right? And then above them you've got English horn and clarinet, right? And then you also have flutes, which, by the way, it's like there's just something problematic about this combination with the brightness of the trumpet below and the weakness of these middle flutes right in here. So I understand, like you're saying, oh well, pianissimo, blah, and then these guys work in there, and then there probably will be, it won't be thrown away. These flutes won't be thrown away. But I would not put pianissimo. I would not have this voice crossing of, pianissimo flutes below, piano, clarinet. And I mean, it should be the other way around, right? Like it should be the clarinet on top and the flutes in the middle and so on. So there's just some real problems with the architecture here. All right, but like once again, like spirit of experimentation. I can't fault you for trying these things out. I think that it's really, really cool. But I don't think that this is going to work. All right. Yeah, just you have the pungency of the English horn, right? That's playing below, and sort of playing along with your trumpet right in here. Okay, and then you've got the clarinet on top, the very bright sound of the clarinet, even at a piano dynamic, and then sandwiched in the middle, you've got these flutes. So this is something that Rimsky-Korsakov would tell you not to do, and I would agree with him. But that's not the problem, okay? that this, you could change around certain instruments and come up with a solution, and then it would work just by changing the flutes or something, all right, or altering something about it. Okay. The problem is that these delicate effects right in here are completely buried, even by the soft, subtle, very, very kind of plain approach that you got in here. All of these beautifully calculated open string harmonics are just not going to be able, they're just not contributing enough, right? So you would have to just strip it way back. I'll tell you something that, like, if it was alto flute, if it was like all the flute section with the alto flute, like a voice crossing with the alto flute on top, or if it was just like the flutes in their normal positions, then you would really be able to hear this, because the quality of tone would not interfere. But the problem is that the way that you got it. You're setting up this octave here with clarinet on top and clarinet on top, and then English horn and trumpet on the bottom. And it doesn't really matter who is sandwiched in between. It just is going to kill all this beauty right in here, and it just really kind of actually makes me a little sad. Okay, but this is all going to work, like the bass clarinet and a little bit of contrabassoon and so on, little staccatos and the harp and so on. That's all really great. All right, and here it kind of gets thicker and more intense and so on, and just right in here, there's absolutely zero reason why this could not be played just as a standard artificial touch 4 harmonic. It would sound so much better rather than this, because the closer that you get together, the more out of tune and the softer it gets. It just gets, like, here you're saying triple P. Well, yeah, absolutely. And how much are you going to be able to crescendo to? Pianissimo, maybe. It's like with some of these combinations, there just is like that you just cannot get a very good sound out of it, right? That the quality of the sound of it is not that great, and the the ability of it to speak is just so. I'm not sure about this. What do you mean by this arrow right in here? Right? I don't know what it's all like a little roll or something like that. I'm not sure what that means. But with a lot of these combinations, I would say that, like, this is really unnecessary. Just telling us, showing us what the pitch is. I would say just try to make. Maybe. I can see it for some of it, but like for longer notes, I don't know. I think that this needs some work, and I think you need to, like, especially like here, you're adding more and more color, more and more brilliance, more and more pungency to this right in here, and you have these incredibly subtle, delicate effects, just right out of Daphnis and Chloe, right? It's just, and they're getting buried by the timbral qualities of your winds and trumpet right in here. So just watch out with this kind of scoring. You have got me on your side. I'm fascinated with texture. That doesn't make me a texturalist, but I have used complex, misty textures in my scoring before. So I have a lot of sympathy for what you're doing here, but I still feel that, like, if you're going to do this, you really have to showcase it. It's just like the same as niente, right? Like, if you're going to use niente, the subtlety of fading in and out of the audibility of of the audible range for the listener should be the show, right? It should be the thing. And it's the same thing here. Like, if you're going to do this incredibly delicate stuff, the harmonic glissando stuff, it should be the focus of the audience, right? Forget about all these people sounding beautiful up here. This is the thing, right? This is what should be showcased. And there's so much you could do with it, just like with harp, maybe the flute family, and then leave in this sort of wind pizzicato kind of staccato, just like just leave all that in there. But when I say wind pizzicato, it's like winds having that sort of pizzicato articulation. The bassoonists and contrabassoon players would tend to have to think of it more as a shorthand or more of an expression rather than bass clarinetists. But bass clarinetists do it too. They just basically they're playing along with pizzicato, or they're carrying on pizzicato, like a pizzicato pattern when the pizzicato drops out and so on. So it's that kind of thing. Anyway, so that takes us up to the end of the C section. And so I must stop, but there's so much more I could continue to say about it. So it's very, very cool score all the same. Even though I'm sitting here ripping your beautiful baby apart, and I just hate that. I don't want you to take these observations as as critiques of your ability. I think that you are doing a ton of experimentation and trying out different things and seeing what's working. And I think, if I don't mistake your intention, then I think what you're doing is bringing it to me and say, does this work? What's the problem? What sounds good? What works? What doesn't? Right? So I would say that you've got a lot of things that work really well on their own, but in the combination that you're putting them in, they're problematic, right? So just like once again, lower flutes and then alto flute in a combination with other instruments that are much, much stronger, right? In close quarters, especially with the trumpet, right? There's just really not much of a chance. Right here, you have the alto flute doubling the trumpet, and you would just really have to balance the heck out of it. Right, so there just are a lot of balance problems inherent in that kind of scoring, right? But I mean, not to make too much of a big deal about all of that stuff. I just really enjoyed looking at this. It's just a really fun score. It's got so many cool ideas in it, and so on. And then other places where I wanted to see more experimentation from you, more playing around with ideas. I feel that if you see a simple section, like the beginning, just see how much you can innovate, right? You've got the ability and you've got the imagination to do that. So I just encourage you to just imagine the heck out of it. Okay? So thanks so much, Thomas. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being a part of this year's orchestration challenge, and for putting so much work into this score, and and for bringing me your ideas, and for being patient with my feedback. It's all really well appreciated, and thanks to all the Patreon supporters out there who made this possible this year. And there's going to be news coming soon about the donation. I'm still sort of working things out with the Lisa Batiashvili Foundation. It actually raised quite a bit of money for them, so it's just getting it to them and getting the transfer and so on, and making sure that they are at the other end and everything else. So that there'll be a video about that coming soon. And and thanks to all the website subscribers, all the viewers, and everybody who's leaving a comment under this, and I hope you do, because that makes things so exciting. And I just really I get some people get little spikes of happy chemicals when they leave, I don't know, mean comments about the Rings of Power series or something. I get really nice little packets of fun chemicals when I see, whenever there's a notification in my email that somebody has left a constructive comment under one of these videos. So that makes me happy. So if you want to up my serotonin level, then please comment below and help out another Thomas and with their journey towards more and more imaginative, intriguing scoring, because it's really worth it. This is a talent that's worth encouraging. So thank you, Thomas, and I will see you in the next evaluation.